a forbidden secret that could destroy it all. Hollywood once hailed him as the golden boy, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed dream boy that every girl wanted. On screen, Tab Hunter was perfection. But beneath the surface was a secret list of forbidden relationships that Hollywood spent decades trying to erase. These weren't the romances staged in glossy magazines. These were the men he secretly loved, the betrayals that scarred him, and the scandals that nearly ruined it all. Hollywood in the 1950s was a kingdom of light, but its brilliance was built on shadows. And no star carried a darker, heavier shadow than Tab Hunter. To the outside world, he looked untouchable. Golden hair blazing under the California sun, blue eyes that made teenage girls lose their breath, and a smile so flawless it seemed sculpted by the studios themselves. Practically overnight, Warner Brothers turned him into America's dream boy. His face filled the pages of fan magazines, his name echoed on radios and movie screens, and his very presence was adored like a statue carved for worship. But that statue was hollow. Behind the carefully polished grin lived a truth so fragile, so forbidden, it could have destroyed everything. Tab Hunter carried a secret that no studio, no priest, no newspaper would ever forgive. He lived each day as if holding a ticking bomb, knowing one careless whisper could ruin his career, strip him of his freedom, and erase him from the very dream factory that had created him. The rules were merciless, written in stone. A leading man had to be seen with glamorous women, his romances orchestrated, his kisses staged, his headlines carefully planted like lines in a script. Tab played his part without flaw, escorting Natalie Wood, smiling beside Debbie Reynolds. But none of it was real. He wasn't living his own life. He was performing a role long after the cameras stopped rolling. And the cost of slipping was terrifying. If the truth came out, the punishment would be swift and brutal. Studios would sever ties in an instant. Fan clubs would collapse in shame. Newspapers would print his name in bold, branding him a disgrace. The FBI was already storming private gatherings, dragging men into the glare of police lights as tabloids circled like vultures. For Tab, a single night in the wrong company, a single careless step, could end not just his career, but his life as he knew it. So he lived on edge every day. Every handshake had to be measured, every smile rehearsed, every word weighed before it left his lips. Applause thundered around him, but inside he sat in silence. Millions adored Tab Hunter, yet he could trust almost no one. Even so-called friends could turn into threats. In Hollywood, betrayal wasn't rare, it was currency. And a secret like his was more valuable than gold. Still, away from the flashbulbs, Tab was only human. He longed for what the studios could never stage. Love that was genuine. A hand he could hold without fear. A voice that whispered his name and meant it. But stepping toward that hidden world was like crossing a tightrope over a pit. A glance held too long. A phone call answered at the wrong moment. A meeting at the wrong address. Any misstep could spark a scandal that devoured him whole. And yet, he could not resist. He followed what his heart demanded, even when it meant risking everything. Some encounters gave him fleeting happiness, brief but real. Others turned into romances that had to be hidden like forbidden treasures. And a few ended in betrayals so sharp, the wounds never fully healed. These were the chapters that fan magazines never dared to print. The hidden bonds erased from official records. The scandals reduced to whispers that never reached the headlines. To understand Tab Hunter, you cannot stop at the glossy posters or the staged smiles. You must step into the corridors he kept hidden, a world of forbidden affection, hushed promises, and secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. And it was there, in the silence of that double life, that Tab Hunter's true story began. The first name ever whispered in connection to Tab Hunter was one almost no one saw coming: Ronnie Robertson. To the world, Ronnie was dazzling, a prodigy on the ice who spun so fast people swore he might disappear into thin air. He was America's boy wonder, Olympic glory within reach, a golden star in his own right. But in the shadows of Hollywood, his life collided with Tabbs. And from that moment, both men carried a secret that could never be seen in daylight. How it started is still debated. Some say Tabb first spotted Ronnie at a private Hollywood party, the kind where champagne flowed and the press was carefully locked outside. Others insist they were introduced by men who lived in the same hidden world. Men who smiled on red carpets but lived in fear once the lights went out. However it began, Ronnie slipped into Tabb's orbit. Young, fearless, untamed. Not a studio invention, not a polished leading man, but real. And that made him dangerously irresistible. For Tabb, Ronnie became an escape. With him, the mask fell away. He could laugh without worrying how it looked in photos. He could speak without rehearsing every word. He could touch without pretending it was for the camera. But freedom always came with fear. Imagine two golden boys seen together too often. The risk was enormous. One wrong look, one careless hand, a single photograph left undeveloped in the wrong darkroom, and the dream would shatter overnight. There are whispers of close calls. A studio driver once claimed he saw a figure slipping out Tabb's back door well past midnight. Small, wiry, moving fast, like a skater escaping the spotlight. Another rumor placed Ronnie in the Hollywood Hills after dark, his car hidden far down the road, headlights off, waiting for the street to clear before vanishing into Tabb's apartment. Some even say the police raided a party one night where both men were present, and though no names were printed, Tabb left shaken, convinced that one slip could put his career in handcuffs. None of it was ever proven. But the whispers didn't stop. And in Hollywood, whispers were often more dangerous than facts. Some say Tabb quietly helped Ronnie's career, slipping him money for training, covering travel when competitions demanded more than he could afford. Others insist the romance was uneven, Ronnie bold and restless pushing against the limits, while Tabb, terrified of exposure, kept pulling back. Which version is true? No one knows. What remains is tension, uncertainty, and the gnawing suspicion that someone, somewhere betrayed them. And betrayal is where the story turns. Did a so-called friend whisper their secret into the wrong ear? Did jealousy from rivals tear open cracks that could never be repaired? Or did Ronnie himself, impulsive and proud, push too far into a world that wasn't ready for them? The truth is murky, blurred by fear, buried under silence. Even Tabb admitted years later it was impossible in those days to separate real love from sheer paranoia. What is certain is this: Ronnie Robertson left a mark that never faded. He wasn't just another hidden name. He was the first flame, the boy who gave Tabb a glimpse of happiness and the man who taught him how dangerous that happiness could be. Their story burned bright, then vanished like a trace on ice, gone in an instant, leaving only the memory. Ronnie's name never appeared beside Tabb's in glossy magazines. The studio machine made sure of that. But in smoky whispers, in back rooms and late-night conversations, his shadow lingered. The boy who spun faster than anyone alive, and the secret that haunted Tabb Hunter long after the applause had died away. There's a story Hollywood insiders still whisper about. One night in the late 1950s, a photographer swore he had the shot of a lifetime. Anthony Perkins slipping into Tabb Hunter's driveway after midnight. By morning, the negatives were gone, bought off or buried. The proof vanished, but the rumor lived on. Because if Ronnie Robertson was Tabb's first spark, Anthony Perkins was the love that set his world on fire. Perkins was already becoming a sensation. Tall, dark-haired, with that restless charm that made him look both fragile and dangerous at the same time. Paramount saw him as the next great leading man, and later he would terrify the world as Norman Bates in Psycho. But behind that rising career was a secret that tied him to Tab Hunter in ways few ever suspected. Their romance didn't unfold in the open. It hid in shadows, in the balcony of the Chateau Marmont, where some say they first slipped away from a crowded party, in the dark corners of Los Angeles theaters, where they arrived separately and sat together only after the lights dimmed. For a time, they even lived close enough to walk between each other's houses under cover of night. It was love, but it was love on borrowed time. Hollywood's rules were merciless. Warner expected Tab to be seen with Natalie Wood. Paramount needed Perkins to appear straight, pairing him with ingenues in gossip columns. Every kiss, every headline, every photograph was staged to sell the illusion. And so Tab and Perkins became masters of secrecy. They walked on eggshells, every glance rehearsed, every move calculated. But secrecy corrodes. Friends noticed the tension. Some claimed Perkins, hungry for stardom, started to pull back when he realized the risks. Others whispered that powerful figures in Hollywood pushed him away from Tab, warning that being seen with another man could destroy everything. There were even darker rumors that Perkins, whether out of fear or ambition, let their secret slip to the wrong ears. Nothing was ever proven, but the possibility hung over Tab like a shadow. And then there were the close calls. A nosy neighbor once told friends she saw Perkins slipping through Tab's garden gate at dawn. A reporter claimed to have overheard the two arguing in a quiet cafe off Sunset, voices hushed but unmistakable. These stories were never confirmed, yet they spread like wildfire in back rooms, feeding Hollywood's appetite for secrets it couldn't print. For Tab, Perkins was more than a lover. He was the mirror of his own struggle, a man caught between passion and paranoia, between desire and survival. Together they found moments of joy, but those moments were poisoned by fear. The romance that should have been liberating instead became a reminder of how tightly Hollywood's chains could bind. Years later, Tab admitted the relationship shaped him more than any other. Perkins went on to carve his name into film history with Psycho. Tab, meanwhile, carried the memory, the stolen glances, the secret visits, the love that might have been if the world had been different. Anthony Perkins wasn't just another hidden chapter. He was the turning point, the one who showed Tab Hunter how intoxicating love could be, and how devastating it was when love had to live in the shadows. If Anthony Perkins was the love that consumed him, then Roddy McDowall was the shadow that never left his side. Roddy wasn't just another familiar face in Hollywood. He was sharp, witty, always in the right rooms, and trusted in ways very few people ever were. For Tab, that trust was priceless. While Perkins came and went like a storm, Roddy was steady, always nearby, always watching. Too steady, some thought. Was it friendship, loyalty, or something more complicated, wrapped in silence? Their closeness was undeniable. They were spotted sharing late dinners long after the city had gone quiet, slipping out through side doors when the waitstaff looked away. They vanished on weekend trips that were never mentioned in the press. At parties, Roddy had a habit of letting his hand linger on Tab's shoulder, casual enough to pass as friendly, yet just long enough to spark whispers. Then came the photographs. Only a handful exist today, hidden in private collections. One shows them poolside, leaning close, laughing like two men who had forgotten the world outside. Another captures them at a gathering, heads bent together as though sharing a secret no one else could hear. They never crossed the line in front of a camera. They were too careful for that. But the body language told another story, one the studios would have buried at any cost. When the confidential scandal threatened to end Tab's career, it was Roddy who stepped in. He knew the lawyers who could make files vanish, the insiders who could be paid to hold their tongues. He led Tab into private circles where actors and directors lived the same way, bound by silence. connected by fear. For a few hours, behind closed doors, Tab could breathe. But protection like that always comes with a cost. Roddy knew everything. Every name whispered in secrecy, every place Tab risked letting the masks slip, every rumor that could have turned into a headline. Knowledge like that was dangerous and powerful. Did Roddy use it to his advantage? Did their closeness blur into something Tab couldn't control? No one can say for sure. But in a city where secrets were currency, their bond was worth more than gold. There were close calls that fueled the speculation. One story told of a studio photographer arriving unannounced at Tab's house, only to notice a car hidden discreetly down the street. Another claimed they left a dinner party through the back alley just minutes before the front door exploded with flashbulbs. Nothing made the papers. But in Hollywood, the whispers were often more lethal than the headlines. Unlike Perkins, whose absence cut deep, Roddy was always there. He was the voice on the phone when the weight of the world grew too heavy. The quiet figure at the edge of a room, cigarette in hand, watching as Tab tried to laugh with the crowd. Not always in the spotlight, but always close enough to matter. A shadow that followed him everywhere. And that was the mystery. Was Roddy a friend? A protector? A lover hidden in plain sight? Or perhaps all three at once? To some, he was the one man who never betrayed Tab. To others, he was the keeper of secrets too dark to ever be named aloud. Roddy McDowall was not the blaze of a headline romance. He was the silence that endured, a constant presence, a shadow that never faded. And like all shadows, his true shape was impossible to capture. The world is left only to wonder what really passed between them, and what was buried forever in the silence they shared. Before Warner Brothers polished his smile and sold him as America's dream boy, Tab Hunter already belonged to one man, Dick Clayton. On paper, he was just an agent. In reality, he was something far more. The man who discovered him, molded him, and, according to whispers, kept him closer than anyone else dared. Clayton had once been a struggling actor, a face audiences forgot, before he reinvented himself as the man behind the curtain. That gave him an edge. He knew the hunger of auditions, the sting of rejection. When he met Tab, still an awkward blonde kid answering to Arthur Jelian, Clayton didn't just see potential. He saw someone he wanted to shape, protect, and perhaps claim for himself. He became Tab's architect. He arranged the photo shoots, the auditions, the fake dates with young actresses. But the arrangement went beyond business. Clayton was everywhere. The late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn. The car parked discreetly outside Tab's home at hours no agent should be visiting. Neighbors whispered about Clayton staying overnight. Assistants joked, carefully, that the two spent more time together behind locked doors than Tab ever did with his supposed girlfriends. There were incidents that painted the picture more vividly. A studio photographer once dropped by Tab's house unannounced, only to find Clayton's jacket tossed over a chair. Tab flustered, both men emerging from the back room moments later with stiff smiles. At a Hollywood party, guests remembered Tab leaning against a wall, exhausted, only for Clayton to slip an arm around his waist, guiding him out as though the rest of the room had vanished. It looked protective, but the intimacy was impossible to ignore. And then there was the rumored photograph. Whispers claim a roll of film nearly made its way to the tabloids. Tab and Clayton, poolside, seated close, heads bent together, eyes locked in a way no publicist could spin as business. Clayton allegedly paid dearly to make the negatives disappear. The story was never proven, but in Hollywood, the absence of proof often spoke louder than facts. When danger struck, it was Clayton who moved like a fixer. During the Confidential magazine scandal, when Tab's name was about to be splashed across the front page, Clayton pulled strings, leaned on lawyers, and made sure the worst never saw daylight. To the world, he was the loyal agent saving his client. To those who looked closer, it was something more, a man protecting both their lives from being exposed. That was the paradox. Clayton gave Tab safety, but also control. He knew every name, every secret meeting, every risk. Some insiders swore Clayton ended Tab's budding romance with another actor, dismissing it as bad for business. Others whispered it was jealousy, a warning that no one would come between them. To the public, Dick Clayton was just the agent, the man behind the deals. But to Tab, he was savior and captor in one, the man who built him, shielded him, and perhaps loved him in ways that could never be spoken aloud. Their bond wasn't the blaze of a public romance. It was a private fire, hidden behind curtains, sustained by secrecy, and haunted by the knowledge that discovery would destroy them both. And that's what makes his role so haunting. Dick Clayton wasn't simply the man who built Tab Hunter's career. He may have held the part of him the world was never meant to see. Roddy McDowall shielded him. Dick Clayton fought to protect him. But if Tab Hunter had guardians in the shadows, then who set the trap that nearly destroyed him? The name was Henry Wilson, Hollywood's most feared agent. To the world, he was the kingmaker who discovered Rock Hudson, Troy Donahue, Guy Madison, men whose faces defined a generation. But in the industry, everyone knew his other reputation. He collected beautiful young actors like trophies, and he kept their secrets locked away, pulling them out only when it served him. With Henry, nothing came free. Tab was never officially one of Wilson's boys, but that didn't keep Henry from circling close. At private parties, he would lean in too near, whispering into Tab's ear as if sharing some joke no one else could hear. He introduced Tab to hidden circles, men who lived behind masks, men who carried the same fears. Sometimes, after those dinners stretched past midnight, the guests would be dismissed, one by one, until only Tab remained. No one knew exactly what happened in those rooms once the doors shut, but whispers said Tab often left looking tense, collar pulled high, eyes lowered. There were stories of notes passed quietly, scrawled on scraps of paper. "See me after rehearsal. Don't be seen with him again." One assistant swore those messages carried both promises and warnings. Another claimed Wilson once sent Tab a gold watch, his initials engraved inside, a gift so extravagant it raised eyebrows. Tab rarely wore it, and after the scandal broke, the watch disappeared entirely, never seen again. Henry had a way of mixing affection with menace. At public events, he'd step forward to adjust Tab's tie or brush imaginary lint from his jacket, gestures that looked fatherly to outsiders but felt far too intimate to those who noticed the glint in his eyes. And then there was the line he was overheard saying one night, with a smile that chilled, "You know the secrets I've kept for you. Don't make me use them." What mattered was that Wilson knew everything. He knew where Tab slipped away after dark. He knew the names of the men Tab trusted most. He knew the fragile places in his life that could not withstand exposure. And in Henry's hands, knowledge was never safe. When Confidential magazine threatened to expose Rock Hudson, Henry struck a bargain. Rock would be spared. Tab would take the fall. Overnight, the whispers hardened into headlines, and Tab's carefully manufactured image collapsed. To the world, it was just another scandal. To Tab, it was betrayal by a man who had stood too close, who had brushed his shoulder at parties and whispered promises behind closed doors. That was Henry Wilson's cruelty. For Roddy and Clayton, closeness meant protection. For Henry, closeness meant possession, and possession always came with a price. In the end, Henry Wilson wasn't remembered as Tab's lover or his ally. He was remembered as the man who blurred the line between desire and control, who turned intimacy into leverage, and who proved that in Hollywood, even your most private secrets could be traded like currency. After the storm with Henry Wilson, Tab Hunter longed for quiet. And for a brief time, he thought he had found it. That quiet came in the form of John. Not a star, not a studio invention, but a man who slipped into his life like an anchor. To the outside world, John was introduced as Tab's secretary, a companion who managed calls, booked travel, kept his calendar neat. But behind closed doors, it was something closer to love. In Virginia, far from the flashbulbs, they built a life that looked almost ordinary. Neighbors whispered about the two men grocery shopping together, walking the dog, cooking dinner in their small home. They were careful, but not invisible. For Tab, it must have felt like a stolen miracle. Evenings by the fireplace, laughter without cameras, letters passed across the breakfast table filled with words he could never speak in public. But peace for Tab never lasted. Those letters, playful, intimate confessions written in his own hand, became the fault line. One night, after weeks of tension, they erupted into a fight. Voices carried through thin walls. A door slammed, and soon after, whispers began. Assistants muttered about envelopes John kept hidden in his desk. Friends claimed they saw him wave a stack of folded pages like a weapon during an argument. The love notes, once tokens of affection, had turned into leverage. The threat was simple: pay or risk exposure. It was more than a bluff. One rumor tells of a journalist who received an anonymous call promising evidence that Hollywood's golden boy was living a double life. Another story claims that a studio publicist intercepted a manila envelope before it ever reached a tabloid office. Inside, a single letter in Tab's handwriting, tender but damning. The package vanished, destroyed before it could surface. But the message was clear. Tab's secret was hanging by a thread, and this time it was someone inside his home pulling at it. The relationship collapsed under the weight of that betrayal. John disappeared from Tab's life, but the damage lingered. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the cruel reminder that even love, the rarest thing in his world, could be twisted into a weapon. And so Tab retreated again, guarded and scarred, convinced that every time he reached for closeness, it would end in exposure. But fate hadn't finished with him yet. Because after all the shadows, the betrayals, and the scandals, there would come one man who refused to hide, one man who stood by him until the very end. That man was Alan Glazer. At first, it didn't look like love. Alan was younger, a film producer with ambition in his eyes and a confidence that set him apart from the timid companions of Tab's past. Their connection began in the way so many Hollywood bonds did. A professional spark, a shared project, long conversations about the industry that stretched into the night. But somewhere between the scripts and the plans, something shifted. One evening, after a dinner that ran later than either had expected, Alan walked Tab to his car. There was no press, no handlers, no one watching. And in that silence, Tab let himself linger just a moment longer than he should have. Alan didn't pull away. That was the difference. So many times before, Tab's life had been filled with quick glances, half-whispered goodbyes, touches that dissolved the second they began. But Alan stayed. His hand remained where it was, steady, warm, unashamed. From then on, their closeness deepened. Tab, once forced to fake dates with starlets for the cameras, could now enjoy quiet breakfasts with Alan, no script required. They cooked together, traveled together, fell asleep on the same couch watching old movies. What had always been stolen in shadows with others, the casual brushing of hands, the comfort of leaning on someone's shoulder, the safety of waking up beside another man. With Alan, it became daily life. For Tab, it was nothing short of revolutionary. There were whispers, of course. Neighbors saw the two coming and going, noticed that Alan's car was always in the driveway. In another era, it might have spelled disaster. But by then, Tab had endured enough betrayals to know that real love was worth the risk. And Alan was more than worth it. When the old fears crept in, When Tab found himself scanning over his shoulder out of habit, Alan's presence pulled him back. He didn't just share the secret. He carried it with Tab until it no longer felt like a burden. Years turned into decades. They traveled across Europe, walked beaches in California, hosted dinners where laughter echoed louder than the memories of scandal. And through it all, Alan never demanded the mask. He wanted only the man beneath it. Tab, who had once hidden even his laughter, now let himself smile freely in Alan's company. It was Alan who stood beside him when the memoir was written, who encouraged him to finally tell the story the studios had buried. And when the documentary cameras rolled years later, it was Alan's hand you could see, steadying him as he spoke of the life he once thought he could never admit to. For Tab, Alan was more than a partner. He was proof that love could survive the weight of secrets, the cruelty of Hollywood, and the passing of time. After a lifetime of hiding, Tab Hunter's truth came with Alan Glaser, a man who gave him the one thing Hollywood never could, a love that didn't need to be erased. In the end, Tab Hunter's story was never just about scandal or betrayal. It was about survival, about a man who lived through decades when a single rumor could have destroyed him, yet still found the courage to love. From fleeting romances in the shadows, to friendships tangled in secrecy, to betrayals that nearly broke him, every chapter led to the same truth. He never stopped searching for connection. And finally, with Alan Glaser, he found it. Not in a headline, not in a studio script, but in real life, in a love that lasted. That was Tab Hunter's greatest victory. Not the fame, not the box office, not the glossy magazine covers. It was the fact that after a lifetime of hiding, he got to live his truth. And he did not have to live it alone. His journey is a reminder that even in the harshest times, even under the brightest and most unforgiving spotlight, authenticity has power. Secrets can wound, betrayals can scar, but love, when it finally arrives, can outlast them all. Tab Hunter was Hollywood's golden boy. But beyond the posters and premieres, he was something far more extraordinary. A man who dared to seek love in a world that told him he couldn't. And in the end, he found it. And his story doesn't just belong to the past, it echoes now. Because every hidden letter, every whispered secret, every love forced into the dark reminds us how much was risked just to be human. Tab Hunter carried that weight, and yet he still carved out a life, a career, and finally a love that endured. That is what makes his legacy unforgettable. If this journey through Hollywood's hidden history moved you, don't let it end here. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because there are more untold stories, more secrets the studios tried to bury, and more truths waiting in the shadows. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.